Well, I was born in Melbourne, and my father came from Gippsland in Victoria, and my mother came from the United States. They met in Sydney in 1929, got married in 1930. Dad moved Mum to Melbourne, and they had 3 boys. I was the middle one. When I was 6, I went to Xavier College as a boarder, and I was at Xavier for 10 years. Well, I used to scrap a bit with my elder brother, not with my younger one, but it wasn't easy during the war because Dad was away. He was in the Air Force. Mum was in the Dutch Navy. So we'd come home for school holidays, and that was a great difficulty for Mum because she was working. She'd pack us off to Talpy Station near Balranald, or pack us off to somewhere near Geelong, or wasn't much to occupy us in those days. There were no toys. We used to make little bombs with saltpeter and something else, I don't know what it was, and wrap it up in foil, and we'd put them on the tram track in St Kilda Road in Melbourne, and then hide behind a privet hedge or wherever. The tram would come and hit the thing and set off the explosion, and the tram driver would get off and look around and get back in. And of course it was coupons, and we didn't have much. I thought the war years were pretty rough. I was 13 when the war ended. I remember during the war, of course, being very restricted in what we could eat with the ration cards. There must have been some seeds of faith because I certainly didn't get them from home. I think the smells and bells and things appeal to me, the old Latin Mass and the serving Mass there, and I used to even serve Mass at the Carmelite Monastery. I suppose the faith was implanted. We just absorbed, by osmosis, I think we absorbed the faith. There was a mystique about the whole thing with the Latin and the incense and all that stuff. And my mother, she wasn't a Catholic when she met Dad, but she took instruction and became one, but never practiced. And I didn't know until I was 14 that she was a Catholic. And Dad used to give himself a dispensation on a fairly regular basis from going to Mass for one reason or another. Father said, finish your diploma course in agriculture before you do anything. Well, I left Xavier when I was 15. From that point on, I had a girlfriend, but then I left Melbourne and went up to Horsham, or near Horsham, to Doohan, to the Agricultural College, where I spent 4 years. We've kept in touch with one another and so on. When I was on the land, either jackarooing out here at Hartwood or at home on our own place, Talcook, there weren't many girls around. I don't think I've ever broken anybody's heart. I sought an interview with the local bishop, and when I was 27, I went to the seminary. When can you start? It was a wonderful meeting, but there was something there. There was a seed there that I needed to follow up. My first impression was total shock, I think, adjusting to this way of life, the community life that we had to engage in. The place was chock-a-block. We had 187 students at Springwood. My father died when I was halfway through my studies, and that devastated me. And I thought I'd get out and do something else. The spiritual director said to me, my advice is don't make any major decisions while you're in a crisis. So I followed his advice and stayed on, and got ordained in 1967. And somehow, 55 years later, I'm still going. I felt I was a supernumerary because we had so many priests at the time that poor Bishop Warren didn't know what to do with us when we were ordained. So the bishop told me to report to South Broken Hill. And I said to him, Father, you're going to give me a part of the parish to visit? He said, we don't visit in the hot weather. I said, why not? And he said, because the women may be scantily clad. I said, please give me a section of the parish to visit. So I started at one end of Knox Street, the far end of the parish, and I knocked on every door and saw nothing of any interest, I can assure you. The bishop comes out. He said, I want you to come into the cathedral. Broken Hill was the refuge for sinners. And I had a plane when I was at Broken Hill, because I learnt to fly in the Air Force, and I was there for about 2 years. And then there was a bit of a difficulty down at Barham Parish, and I was sent down there. I had a great time in my first parish, and I was only there 12 months, and so I went to Parks, and I had this dog, a German short-haired pointer, frightened the life out of the parish priest. So my last parish was Wentworth, and I retired to Nilluquin. Satisfaction in being able to help people, especially funerals. I visit people on a regular basis, say their husbands have died and I've conducted their funeral, or the wife has died and I've conducted the funeral, and I'll follow up with the bereaved and visit them regularly. That's something that I've always done, and it's appreciated. I've tried to preach as well as I can, and some people do appreciate that, but it's a fairly thankless task, I think, being a priest. I did a niece's wedding, and she had to remind me that there was paperwork to do at the end of it. I'd forgotten that. When I joined up as a seminarian in 1960, the churches were full. In Broken Hill, there were 2,000 people going to Mass. There were 600 people going to Mass in the little parish I was in, and I thought this would continue for the rest of my priestly life. And then things started to fall away. The wind went out of the sails. It was very, very disheartening. Why didn't I walk away? I just kind of hung in, and as I got older, I hung in. And I got very old, and I still hang in. I've never considered myself to have been a good priest or an exemplary priest. I've always tried to prepare for the liturgy, preparing homilies and so on. I've always taken funerals seriously. I haven't just shown up on the day. The more I read about God, the more I pray about it. I think God somehow loves me and is forgiving, and there'll be a place for me in the kingdom. I just kind of get up each day and carry on, and it goes on and on and on. I don't think I'll ever die. I've got my coffin sitting in the garage waiting. I've got my grave all done, and the only thing missing is the date of death. I have tried the coffin for size. I think when the time comes, I'm just going to have to surrender and hope for the best. Amen.